apologize that we are matching.
Yes, let's start with that.
Hi, everybody. I am Carol Kauffman, founder of the Institute of Coaching with Margaret Moore and Susan David, and a senior leadership advisor at Egon Zender, which is where I am now, hence the high rise in the background. And I am so delighted to be here with Douglas Choo. He'll have some great things to offer us. Now, you all may know Douglas is a full-time coach and a fellow at the Institute has really helped us with our strategy and a number of things. But the identity he's going to pull on mostly from today is as his role, he was the head of strategy at Metlife Group for quite a while, but he also comes, like many of you do, from a background of being consultant. He was a consultant at Deloitte and he was a consultant at McKinsey. So first, we're going to ask him about change at scale. And at some point, we're going to shift, and you guys can ask us questions about how do you balance that? How do you do how do you do consulting with a coach headset? So, Douglas, why don't you start out by just sharing with us some of the things you've learned about coaching at scale?
Yeah, coaching at scale is really helping leaders, beyond preparing themselves for change, how do they amplify their impact on the people that they lead so that that change is indeed at scale, so that the organization is actually ready for that change and actually embarking on the journey for change. So it is coaching beyond the individual, coaching the individual to see their role as leader and how do leaders actually impact the change at the organizational level.
Mhm. I think we need to pause for a moment. Austin, I'm seeing a whole bunch of messages that people cannot hear us. Can you let us know or go into the private chat if we start again? I keep getting no sound and no sound.
Uh, Maybe the mute button, check the mute button.
It seems to me that a number of them has said they have done that. Those of us who, if any of you can hear, will you put it in the comments so we can track you? Okay, Samantha can hear. Okay, sound is okay. More of us can hear, but a bunch of us have not. Some of you who could not hear before, you can hear now? Okay, everybody. I love you guys are all like helping one another.
Great.
Okay, so for those of you who could not hear, I'm going to like zip through the intro again, which is, and I'll try not to say it too quickly. So I'm Carol Kauffman, the founder of the Institute of Coaching with Margaret Moore and Susan David, and I'm also a senior leadership advisor at Egon Zender. And I am here with Douglas, who is a fellow of the Institute of Coaching and a full-time coach now, but he comes to us from a really fabulous background of being the head of strategy at Metlife Group, no small task, and his background as a consultant at McKinsey and Deloitte. And he's speaking to us today from that kind of perspective. And at the end, we may talk a bit about how you weave those roles together. So, Douglas, please share with us your insights about change at scale.
Thank you, Carol. Very excited to be with you all. Change at scale is about helping the leaders that we coach understand their impact on the organization, to amplify that impact so that beyond just coaching them about how they go through change individually, how as a leader they are going to guide and impact the organization through the change that the organization is going through. Hence, change at scale, beyond yourself as the leader, the signals that you send, the things that you do, how does that impact the organization and lead that organization through change?
Exactly. So tell us a little bit about, I know you have sort of these 6 principles of change at scale. And can you just walk us through the very first one?
Well, it really centers on two conditions. And as coaches, if we help these leaders really create those conditions, then when these conditions are present, change is more likely to happen, and
Mhm.
change will be less depleting for the organization. Two
Mm.
conditions. The condition one is the willingness to change, and this condition number two is the ability to change. So with one without the other is not going to really work. So even if you are willing and you don't empower the team and you don't give them a roadmap, you don't give them the tools and processes, they're going to be very frustrated. But
Mm.
on willingness to change, first you need to coach the leaders to help the organization understand the strategic value to the organization. Why are we doing this change? Why are we transforming? Why are we investing in new technology? Why are we buying a new company? So you need to help the leader need to first understand the strategic value, and then help the people that he lead or she lead or they lead understand the strategic value behind the change.
So what you're saying is the first step is really from your history as a strategist, if people are going to be willing to change, those of us in individual coaching primarily start thinking of stages of change. Are you in pre-contemplation, etc.?
Yes,
But what I love about this is you're saying, okay, all that, but let's pull back and really pull on why are we doing this? What's the
yes,
strategy? And that opening people up to being able and, well, in this case, being willing to change. Yeah,
exactly.
tell us some more.
Exactly. So then once they understand the strategic value of that change to the organization, you take it one step further, which is what's in it for me? What is the value to the individual that you are leading, so that you get the buy-in as well to sort of create that willingness to change. And then finally, there's a very important thing, and I think we coach many leaders on this aspect, is the aspect of trust. How do you as a leader increase the trust that people have on you, that you are going to lead them through that change? Without this third element, that willingness is always going to be that much. But to
Mhm.
increase that willingness to change, help them understand the strategic value, help them understand the value to themselves, what's in it for me, and
Mhm.
then build on your trust, right? Build on the trust that they have in you. Do you have their back? Are you authentic? Are you logical? Those conditions of trust that will create willingness to change.
Mhm. And that also reminds me of the trust equation that,
Yes,
do you want to share a little bit of that? Because I love that. So you're saying trust through who you are you
yes.
being authentic? Trust through, your capacity to see other people. Tell us about the trust equation.
Well, it's three conditions of trust, right? It's a three-legged stool, as we always. Any one of the legs that's not the same is going to be a wobbly trust, right?
Hmm.
So, are you authentic? Are you who you are, right? Do you walk the talk? Do you lead by example, for example, right? So you are who you are. Do you always tell the truth, or do
Mm.
you
Oh,
hide?
yeah.
Yeah,
That's a big one.
big one these days, right?
Yeah.
Then the second thing is logic or competence. Well, when people look at you as a leader, have you always been logical? Have you had a track record that you actually deliver on the things that you say? So competence and logic, right? So even if your arguments are not very logical and not very cogent, more difficult for me to trust you. But you're very compelling and it makes sense. Yeah, I'm going to trust you more. And finally, which is the very important thing, is, do I believe you have my back? When you say charge up the hill, are you leading me to sure death, or you have thought this through, right? You have thought this through, and you're not going to, why do we trust as children? Why do we trust our parents? Because mommy is never going to let harm come to me. She always has my back. So as a leader, how do you send that signal that you always have your people's back? Now, if you have these three conditions, they are more likely to trust you, even if they are not sure about, well, should we be doing this? But if they trust you, they're going to follow you when you charge up that hill. When you say charge, they're going to go because they trust you.
And also in the context of what you've said, like I've heard the trust equation before. Okay, so the authenticity, etc., your credibility divided by how much I trust you and I think you're authentic. But I love this extra piece you've put on it, which is okay, but do I understand the whole picture of why this is strategically important for my company?
Exactly.
And I want to help that company because I trust my leader. And then, on an individual level, will this serve me and help me serve the company?
Hmm.
It
Another
does.
condition for change at scale, at an organizational level, the leader that we are coaching has to create the ability to change. That's the second important condition. And an ability, this is where I wear more of my consulting hat than my coach hat, right? Because
Yeah.
this is just the mechanics of change now. So, for example, you must help the leader develop a very clear roadmap, right? What's going to happen first? What resources do we need? You need to identify the tools and the systems and lay out the processes. And tying back to willingness, are there the right incentives in place for
Mm.
people to carry out this change, right? What's in it for me? So you need to set up the tools or help the leader come up with the tools, systems, and processes. And then finally, you got to empower the team. Is the team enabled with the right skills, right? You, if the change is very drastic and very different from what they are used to, then as a leader, you need to sort of enable them with the right skills and the right experience. And if they don't have that, then you hire help to help the team achieve a higher ability to change. So willingness and ability, scale,
Mhm.
change at scale.
So I hear two things in that. One of them, that, and we won't go in that direction now, but you're also saying in this whole arc of change management and scale, also where's the space for team coaching?
Exactly.
To really be assessing, and I know you do a lot of that. Sort of how do you really sort of assess the people and really help create the positive dynamics? And
Mm.
one of our people, who we don't know your name, but thank you, says, where does humility and empathy fit in? And seems to me that tracks into trust, but I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Absolutely. This is a very actually it's going to be, if you guys know that Carol's about to publish a book, right? So in her book, she actually talked about um, notions of humility, the importance of humility, and in the context of validating your vantage point as a leader, right? Are you always, invoking your 5 C's? Those of you who've worked with me always know that I talk about the C's, and one of the C's is curiosity and compassion, right? So especially if you are coaching successful leaders who are so used to success, and they are so confident because they have done a lot of things in the past that lead them to success. Well, their default is relying on what they know. And if they keep relying on what they know, they stop asking questions. They assume that what I've done in the past has worked, and therefore it should work again. And therefore they're down on curiosity, which is the flip side of humility. So as coaches, we have to increase. Yeah,
That was really good. I never thought of that before. Curiosity is the flip side of humility.
right.
Douglas, that's a great takeaway. Thank you.
Right. So as coaches, right? So then we check in with the leader. How curious are you? How do you validate that what you think is right is in fact right? How do you validate your vantage point that your reality is in fact the same reality that your team sees? Your team may be seeing another reality. So check in on the C's, validate their vantage point. Are you looking at the big picture from their perspective? Remember, another thing that Carol will say in her book is, through the myth about interpersonal leadership. The first myth is the myth of treat people like you want to be treated. Well, that's the golden rule. But the better rule is the platinum rule. Treat them how they want to be treated. So you need to know that myth and override that myth. And part of it is humility. Part of it is curiosity. Validate your vantage point. Yeah.
Okay. You don't have to stop on a dime. Um, Okay, yeah, stuff on a dime there, Douglas. I have spoken. We have a question,
Another question. Great.
and so what it is I'll give a 30-second preamble to it. The question is, could you list the 5 C's? And we've had LinkedIn Live a long time ago with someone named Dick Schwartz, who embodies the internal family systems model, which you can refer back to that, or we can tell you more later. And his whole idea is that we all have a core wise self, and we can access it. But how do you know you're in it? And so what he talks about is the 5 C's. He actually has 8. We made it
8.
5.
Yes, 8.
But of the 5 C's. So Douglas, why don't you walk us through that,
Sure.
and then maybe show how you can use that in your coaching.
Yes, I use it a lot in my coaching, right? First C, how calm are you? On a scale of 1 to 10, and that's Carol Kauffman's magic. On a scale of 1 to 10, how calm are you, right? Now, then you get to how clear are you? How clear are you about what's going on? How clear are you about the challenges that is before you? So calm, clear. Then how curious are you? Even when you know the answer, ask one more question. Who might disagree with you? Who might have a different? Stay curious. Now, curiosity is going to lead to compassion. Once you are curious, why is this person always disagreeing with me? Is there something else that I don't see? Right? From curiosity, you will lead to maybe she has some constraints that I didn't realize, right? That I didn't appreciate. That leads to compassion. And finally, the very important C, even if you are calm and clear and curious and compassion, it's not going to lead to change if you don't have courage to take action. Courage is not the lack of fear. Courage is the ability to act based on your values and purpose despite your anxiety. So if these 5 C's are high, these are the conditions that Richard Schwartz talked about. If you can hone these conditions, the human conditions, performance is likely to be higher. If you're not calm, if you're not clear, you're not curious, you're always blind, walking with your blinkers on, your blind spots, and default to autopilot, your performance is only up to a certain level. But if you can achieve a higher level of all these C's, performance is going to be that much higher.
So I have to say 2 things about that, guys. Well, since I introduced this, I got to tell you, this is the best description I have ever heard of it. And I want to turn this into a standalone snippet. Douglas, that was...
now you're asking me to write a blog now. You're just bullying me to write something.
You got it, babe. The other thing, guys, is for each of us, some of us are naturally better at some of them than the others. So, and that's sort of like the bedrock. So for me, it's like the number one thing that goes is being clear. So for me, it's like always important to me to do what I need to do to be clear. When I was talking to another person, not Douglas, he said, no. For me, it's compassion. I start out being so judgmental. I'm clear, but I've got to work on my compassion. And then, so Douglas, I don't know if you know or want to talk about that story of going into the meeting and how the CEO and his giving himself a 2 on compassion turned out to be.
Yes, actually, I'm glad you mentioned it. It's again going to be in her book, Carol and David Noble.
Stop with the book.
No. If you guys want to know that story, it's in the book. Okay, so actually, it's not one of my coaches, but David Noble was coaching a very senior executive who is about to enter a very contentious executive meeting, and he knew it. He knew it's going to be like clash of the titans. So then we check in on the C's, right? So where are you? Very high on clear, very high on calm, very high on courage for sure, but very low on compassion. Then we say, well, turn up your compassion. Can you work on getting a higher level of compassion? And to his credit, this leader actually worked on his compassion during the meeting, and he flipped the meeting completely around. Instead of a contentious meeting, he came across, when he just pushed on his compassion, and of course relying on his curiosity as well, the whole team rallied behind him. The whole team, that was one of the best meeting they ever had, even though everybody started the meeting thinking, oh my God, we're going to duke it out, right? So that's a very powerful story. Yeah.
And what was nice about it was what was happening. I forget all the details, but what was happening was one guy was leaving the company that day, and I don't know if it was because I don't remember why anymore, but it was really he was in the meeting, and this is a bunch of probably all men, all powerful men, and this guy started crying.
Yeah.
And the CEO is like,
it's okay.
And then he remembered, oh, compassion. Let me try to practice compassion. So this guy stood up, the CEO went over to the guy who was crying, and this was not a crying organization, and put his arm around him, sat down, put his hand on his shoulder, and was just there for him. And it just blew the minds of everyone. And that really, really changed. And what he said later to David was, if we hadn't had that, I never would have thought of that. And
yes,
what we want as coaches is to expand the repertoire of what leaders are capable of. And then, okay, so that's an individual moment, but you can imagine the ripple effect of people seeing that's what the leader did. So
the change at scale. Now the whole team saw, that invoking the seeds is going to bring the whole team along, and then you don't have to fight. We are one team, and really powerful in team coaching as well, guys. Those of you who do team coaching.
And what I like about what you're presenting is on one hand, kind of really edgy. Do you have your tools right? Do you have your strategy right? Do you have your roadmap right? Do you have your processes right? The bang, 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 bang. This is what a consultant and strategist knows about.
Yes.
With the very more kind of nearly spiritual approach and a coaching approach that's just woven right in there. So Douglas, what is most interesting to you now? Do you want to go through a couple of the other principles and then talk about how coaching and consulting?
Well, actually, I'll just recap, right? So if you think about the first condition, willingness to change, that's all about the individual, the psychology part of it, right? So what's in it for me? You can go into motivation theories as well, right? So how do you keep the motivation high for change so that the willingness to change is sustained, right? And Carol, you talked about the stages of change, which all the coaches on this call should be familiar with, right? First, denial, then acceptance, then then preparation, and then as the leader or as coaches of leaders, we have to help the leader understand not everyone is in the same stage of change, right? Some people are raring to go, ready for action. Some still in denial. So as a leader, are you mindfully alert about the interpersonal challenges, and therefore you could work on motivation at the organizational level and motivation at the individual level?
Yeah, and
so that's all willingness to change, right? The ability to change is more about, once the head is willing, the body must be willing as well. You must have the right muscle to pull this through, right? And then so here, and another theory that I like is a theory of self-determination. And I think, Carol, you like that theory too, right? So first, especially when it comes to change, the sense of autonomy is going to be very low, right? I didn't choose to do this. You, the C-suite, decided to do this. So the sense of autonomy is going to be very low. And those of us who know this theory of self-determination, when autonomy is low, they're not going to buy it. So then the leader, you got to work on their autonomy. How do they feel that they are part of this change rather than change being shoved down from the top? They have to change. They are part. The change is happening with me, not the change is happening to me, right?
Perfect.
Then again, we talk about the capability to change, right? So once they experience the joy of achieving a success, they are more able to see and visualize the change that we need them to achieve. So that's why the roadmap is important, right? That's why in consulting, those of us who have done the roadmap where you have quick wins are very important. So you have a roadmap to let them experience the joy of succeeding, the joy of quick wins. And then finally, the third one is relatedness, right? ACR. Do they feel related, first of all, to their teammates? Do they feel related and connected to the organization? And do they feel related to the change that the organization is going through? What's in it for me? Right? So all these theories really, that's why your notion of the eight, right? Consultant and coach on one side, it really, it for me, it's continuous. It's a continuum. It's not where one ends and the other one starts. It's really, it keeps going round and round and round. It works really well for me.
Yeah. So what Douglas is talking about is you have the C for coaching, the C for consulting, and that they come together. And in some situations, the C of consulting needs to be bigger because that's what you're hired for, but you can do it in a coach way. And for the others, it's really coaching, and then the consulting is done. And so a lot of people, I had a long talk with Magda Mook about this, and sort of there's a way to consult in a very coaching way. So you have this figure eight, but I think of the figure eight as between you and me. So what it is in coaching, I'm sort of pulling and pulling and pulling. But if there's a piece of information that would be useful to you, I'll make what I call an offer, not necessarily consultation, but an offer. But then to flip it back into coaching, I'll say, does that land for you? Does that work for you?
Yeah.
And that's one way to really bring them together. And if you look at the ICF competencies, number 711 is part of the art of how do you bring in something into a coaching. And for those of you that sort of think that's counter, one of the things that Magda said, which is really, Magda's the CEO of ICF. One of the things that Magda said is not to mistake excellent coaching for what you need to do to pass the MCC. If you're sitting with the MCC and you ask one question, you're out, because they want to know you are world class at being able to navigate a conversation just with asking the question. But out there in the world, if you have that skill, you then really have the freedom to go back and forth, but to always not be attached to the person doing what you say. And that's sort of, if you're really going to take super consulting, it's hear what you need to do it, bye.
Yes.
And that's not the kind of consultant you are.
That's definitely not what I do these days. I mean, I think my consulting background has definitely helped in my coaching, right? So you're absolutely right. Consultants are almost obliged to give the answer and then they leave. But as a coach, is one thing, and we all know this, right? It's one thing, if I tell you, it's more likely you won't do it. But if you discover it yourself, right? By invoking that intrinsic motivation. If you discover it yourself and you see the light with your own eyes, not through the light of not through the eyes of your consultant. If you see it, you get it. It's more likely you're going to do it, right?
Oh, yeah.
That's the brilliance about coaching. That's why I love what I do.
Yeah. So I want to pipe up. Let me see if I can do it in 30 seconds. For me, I was taught all questions, and I started saying, well, why do we ask questions? Like, hi, I mean, I could just do a brain dump here in 2 minutes, and wouldn't that save? This is why that's not true. Now, first of all, every now and then it is. David Peterson talks about sometimes, just sort of the basic knowledge. The other way to think of that, though, is to think of the learning pyramid. So you have the pyramid, and if you remember things, that's what fills up the pyramid. So if you just hear a lecture or advice, the pyramid fills up at around maybe 20%. I'm going to get my percentages wrong, but the concept's right. Then if you have experience with it and discussion, it goes up. But if you have to teach the material, it goes way, way up to 90%. And so basically, when you ask someone a question and they're answering it, they're teaching you. Yeah. So a really good way to think of your coaching identity as a student, using that curiosity. And so that's one way to think of it. So Douglas, I'd love for you to have the last word. What is it that you'd like to share with our with our people?
Well, bringing back to change at scale, which is actually the last word actually came from Carol. As coaches, coaching leaders, we coach them to have a coaching mindset, which is exactly Carol is just talking about. If the leaders can teach and coach their team and let the team discover, this is why change is important to the organization. What is it for me? When they see that and the leader is adopting a coaching mindset, bingo, change at scale.
That's wonderful. So thank you. So listen, guys. If you have more questions for Douglas, please send them. Douglas, what's your email again?
Douglas.Choo, as in Jimmy, right? Everybody knows Jimmy Choo.
Got it.
Douglas.Choo at view-advisors.com. View, or you can just connect with me on LinkedIn, and I will respond.
Okay, so thank you guys. And I love some of the comments here. And it's really, really, really lovely how you really, I've been hearing a lot, I see a lot about the issues of putting together the coaching and the consulting. And Carmen, thank you, who said so rich in 30 minutes. So everyone, take care. If you think this would be helpful for somebody, send along the link to the Institute of Coaching. And also you can contact me at carol@theinstituteofcoaching.org. Thank you.
Bye, guys.